Welcome to the WARC Podcast. I'm Ann Marie Kerwin, America's editor, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Preston Rutherford. Preston is not only the co-founder of the men's apparel brand Chubbies, which achieved over $100 million in revenue and was ultimately acquired, but he's also the co-founder of Marathon, a new platform designed to actually measure the revenue impact of brand initiatives. Or, as he's described it, it's the first platform to measure long-term revenue and ROAS from the brand component of your marketing, paid and organic, so you can get off the short-term ROAS hamster wheel. What makes Preston particularly insightful is his deep understanding of both marketing and finance. He's been in the trenches, wrestling with the very questions many of you listening face every day. How do you convince leadership, especially the CFO, to invest in brand building, that it's not just a fluffy expense, but a critical driver of long-term profitable growth? So welcome, Preston.
Yes, thank you. I'm excited. This would be great. And I know we've been talking for a bit, so this should be a fun conversation.
Yes, it should be. So I know one of the most difficult things when you're in a position of trying to get more brand building is even just identifying the problem. So in your experience, how do you get a CFO to acknowledge that your current marketing tactics might have long-term negative impacts and they aren't being captured by the ROI metrics that you're using?
Yeah, great question. The benefit of all of the pain that I think many digital advertisers are experiencing right now, because they've become more pronounced, let's say in the last year, I would say that's relatively inarguable for many brands, is that it's clearly showing up in the profit and loss statement. And how is it showing up? Well, we're spending more and we're getting less, basically. Now, so that's the obvious thing. Then the devil's in the details, because what could happen is that this could be attributed to things that the marketing team is not doing well enough within the context of quote unquote performance marketing. And it's also important to define terms. So let's call, for the purposes of this conversation and what I hope starts to become a new definition of performance and brand, is let's call performance marketing short-term revenue optimizing using click-based attribution as the measure of success. And let's use brand building as generating future incremental demand that manifests by prepping people who are out of market, so that when they are in market, they will come to us, seek us out automatically, search our brand name, come directly to our site, and buy at full price. And when you describe them like that, we have a different set of preconceived notions about what we're talking about, and brand seems a lot more attractive. So that's my piece on definitions. So we're spending more, we're getting less. And then what we need to do is make sure that everyone understands that the problem is not my ad. I'm not running enough ad variants. I don't have enough performance creative, which tends to be the first knee-jerk reaction that many modern, let's call them modern brands who are advertising on Meta, TikTok, Google, tend to knee-jerk to. That's what I did. And then the second thing is our website. Our website needs to convert better. So what are we doing? We go through this whole process of conversion rate optimization, and you'll find some small wins. And that might placate the people for a bit. But the overall downward trend in effectiveness leads to this doom spiral of searching for efficiency while overall effectiveness goes down, meaning you're generating less and less overall return, so dollar in and actual dollars out for your business. And as brands search for efficiency, I want my ROAS to go up. We start to do very suboptimal things that drive short-term revenue, but dramatically impact our ability to drive longer-term revenue. Let's say 30 days out, 60 days out. And back to your question, to the CFO, very basic stats to look at. What was our contribution margin and contribution dollar generation, or just variable profit, over the last 90 days? How did it compare to year prior? Generally, it's going to be dollars are flat and margin is down, or dollars are up but margin is way down. Okay, inarguable. especially if you control for things like COGS or some of these other things that marketing doesn't control. And then you'd also say within that, how much of what was the delta between gross sales and net sales, removing returns, and that's discounts. So how much discount as a percent of total revenue did we use to drive whatever growth we got? Probably we use discounts a lot more. Then it might get into some of the subjective stuff, like let's just look at the ads we're running right now, and let's compare that to what we were running a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I think even a CFO would look at it and say, wow, we are really hard selling now. It just feels like we are giving a hard sell. We are selling our souls here. It's very much product, offer, urgency, rather than things that every brand did earlier on, which was, I want to elicit an emotion. I want you to feel something. I want to clarify how I'm different, not necessarily just on a set of features that I have, but who I am, why I exist, the role I play in your mind, right? And I think those are three things that start the conversation. But overall, it's just lines in the P&L. Let's just look at rolling 90 days, rolling 180 days, and let's compare that to years past. And it's a relatively obvious thing that fundamental business performance is not looking as good. The fourth that just popped back into my mind was, how much of our revenue are we getting from what I like to call, Les Binet calls base sales? I like to call our resilient baseline, meaning revenue we get from people who search for a brand name, come directly to our site, and come to us from organic social referral, clicking from organic social media. That's how I define it. That's very e-commerce centric, but it's who I am. So it's what I understand. And generally, that portion of e-com revenue is becoming a tinier and tinier portion, meaning that any growth that you're getting is largely from our paid, from our ads, right? And that's the volatile, here today, gone tomorrow type revenue, those red spikes in all of those charts in, what is it, marketing there of accountability, or long and short of it, or any of these Les Binet, Peter Field papers that are so amazing, rather than that building of that resilient base that is ultimately what we're trying to do. So those are the four things that I think are relatively inarguable objective metrics that should get anyone in the organization aligned around the fact that, hey, there's a problem to solve.
And it sounds like you very much were on that journey of, here we are as a new DTC brand. We're getting a lot of uptake because a lot of customers are finding us and just buying us because we answer a need. And then did you hit that sort of performance plateau and realize that's when I need to start thinking about brand? Or had you been doing branding to start with?
Right. That's where we start. We start with these stars in our eyes, right? We're going to change the world, right? That's the only thing that gets people to leave their cushy job and take on this massive risk where the probability of failure is so high. There's something missing in the world and I need to fix it. And if we get past let's call it the friction of getting going and maybe finding your first, 1,000 customers, it's very much brand. I mean, and it's doing things that immediately set you apart, immediately differentiate you. So that's where it starts. And that, for us, that's where it started. And then it's the classic, okay, I now have investors, or I have a lot of employees, and that's stressful. I mean, I take care of I put food on their table, or our company does. And we now have quarterly board meetings, and we have financial projections, and we need a predictable, sustainable, systematic growth machine. When we start to layer on all of these sorts of things, it becomes hard to embrace the perceived volatility that comes from these big one-off things. And that's a misconception that brand is these big one-off campaigns. I tend to think that it's an evergreen, always on, fill funnel, empty funnel, fill funnel, empty funnel. And then you're toggling things, but it's not binary, which I think scares some people off. So that was our life cycle. But then as we as you see these metrics show up in Facebook's ad manager or any of these measurement tools, Google, whatever, and you see a big number, the perception of power, of the ability to impact the world in $1 in, $10 out, that is a very powerful and addictive feeling that is hard to wean off of. It is a drug. So everything having to do with drugs is this, right? And it has a similar impact, I guess you might say, right? And it is hard to know when you've reached the point where you've got to change. And for us, we got to a place where we were either going out of business or not. So that was our moment where we kind of reached rock bottom and had to change. And yes, it was exactly that. It was this place where we had to get back to this balance that we had completely lost. So with that balance that we lost, it was now, okay, how do we very basically start generating net new demand? Because we had pretty much exhausted everything that we had. And add the additional note that the ad platforms are changing because they have to continue to show impact, but impact generally meaning in-platform ROAS. And to do that, when they're not growing users as fast as advertiser demand is growing and as fast as they need to grow revenue, the cost simply to serve an impression, as objectively stated in Meta's latest earnings call, is up 14% year over year. So that kind of friction that everyone is running against, if we stick to the status quo, becomes insurmountable in time if we don't change our behavior. But again, it's very hard because it's a gradual shift away or towards pain. And it's so easy to attribute to other things like, oh, this product launch was bad. Oh, it's an election year, so that's probably why everything stinks. Oh, it's Temu. They're just advertising a lot. All of these things that are probably going to go away, rather than, no, it's just that I'm doing the wrong things as an advertiser or as a marketer. And I need to look inward and look at how I need to change my behavior. Am I generating more net new demand than I am harvesting? And that is generally not the case. And am I provoking the types of purchase behaviors that I want more of over time?
Mm-hmm.
Like generally, I want fewer of my purchases coming from clicks on ads and buys in a short-term attribution window. What I want is all of my revenue coming from people who search for my brand name and then buy, or memorize my website or my brand name and buy. And this is digital. And then in retail, I want all of my revenue in retail, or let's call it wholesale or bricks and mortar, to come from people who know me, seek me out, and buy at full price, and do so in such a way where it's above the forecasted number that I set with whoever my retail partner is. I mean, that's how brand manifests. And that's what so few of us are seeing over the last 2-3 years as we've come out of this COVID craziness.
How did you, when you zoomed out to say like, okay, I have to change, how did you take the metrics that you get within the platforms and turn it into a set of metrics that actually work for your business? Like, how did you say, okay, we see what we're getting from the platforms, but that can't be the basis for what we do?
Mm-hmm. 2 things. One is getting away from revenue being the measure of success, the be all end all, and turning it to moving down the profit and loss statement to variable profit or contribution margin, or simply effectively, and I'm going to miss things, but revenue minus discounts, minus returns, minus marketing spend, minus agencies, minus variable creative costs, minus credit card fees, minus. Because marketers can still control that, minus COGS, which is a huge one. Marketers can still control much of that, right? Because we control where we send traffic. If we're talking about a digital business, we control what products we're talking about. We don't control the inventory buys. We don't control necessarily the cost of a particular product, but we need to be on top of what the actual margin is of every single product that we are working to sell. So going from revenue to contribution as our metric of success. But not today, because you can do things that are short-sighted, that gut the future, right? So it's protracted, it's quarter, it is half, it is annual, and that we're trying to lift that. And then it's getting the team to operate towards that metric. So it's not just ivory tower execs using those metrics, it's individual contributors who have this data in their hands. So it's enabling the hands-on keyboard team. If it's an agency, it's making sure they have this data, which I don't think any agency gets contribution on a daily basis, right? Because they're going off of revenue. That being number one. Number two is tests, but not tests like in-platform A/B tests, which got the highest click-through rate, which tend to be the myopic tests many of us run that I ran, but more, let's look at a year. Let's think of 8 tests we're going to run them in a structured fashion, run them from start to finish, and have 8 hypotheses we are looking to test in a year, and do it rigorously, right? Do holdouts, do lift studies, but like conversion lift studies, revenue lift studies, not proxymetric survey-based type stuff, but tie it to actual contribution growth, and stop looking at the in-platform metrics. Or if you are going to come up with a clean, structured, written in stone internal attribution model that is written on paper that someone is accountable to for a whole month, where it says, for this campaign type on this platform with this targeting, I'm going to haircut the ROAS by 50%. And then for this retargeting campaign, or for this, whatever it is, for this prospecting campaign with this creative, I'm going to multiply by 5, and whatever it might be. And that needs to be set in stone, and people need to be accountable to that, but there has to be a single definition for that if you're going to use the in-platform metrics. But very much, I ran this test, here was the lift. Now that's short term. We also need to understand long-term compounding growth. So we need to understand long-term growth trends in things like our share of branded organic search, because we're within a set of competitors. So I love share of branded organic search. It's hard to get the data in a real-time fashion. Google loves to make us wait a couple months before we get that readout. But there are things that we can do to get the data. But that is a great midterm indicator. Are we generally gaining in our share of unpaid branded organic search? That being sort of a long-term piece. So it's balancing the short and the long, and it's making sure we don't get super myopic around contribution in the short term, but that we really start to get a connection of, I do this thing, here's what happens to my overall business, not I do a thing and this is what my ROAS was on a given day based on who clicked on my ads.
Let's say you are a marketer who has realized we've been doing too much short term. We need to start thinking about brand. What would be your advice going into the C-suite to say, here are the key points that as a leadership team we need to align on? Like, what do you want to make sure that everyone's like, this is our new reality. Here's what we're agreeing on. What should it be?
Yeah, I would say number one is our goal is to increase the rolling 90-day contribution dollars at a contribution margin we feel good about. Number two is let's agree and hold hands on this testing methodology. Whether it be geo holdout or Meta provides a great conversion lift study test. They can handle person level holdouts. That's great. These sorts of causal tests that are about as good as it gets. That being number two, testing methodology. Number three, let's put to bed the myth that by pulling a dollar out of performance and putting it into brand, that you're going to see a drop in short-term revenue. And that's maybe the overarching point that I would like to leave our audience with, is that is an assumption that is based on an incorrect definition of what brand is and an incorrect definition of what performance is. So if you define based upon what I put at the beginning, maybe add the layer on brand that is, there are so many people who are in market who are not being reached with your existing targeting creative combos, because these in-market people who are just as likely to be your customers do not respond to that. So that is a piece that just by using your meta ads differently or TikTok ads differently or YouTube ads differently, different creative, brandier creative, you're not going to get that click-based ROAS. But if you're running these lift studies, what I've seen time and time again, firsthand experience, and with a variety of other brands that I speak to all the time, they're seeing short-term conversion lift as well by transitioning to a brandy balanced set of tactics. So, and I think that's maybe the point that I would like to leave the audience with, is that by transitioning to doing things that get people to feel and remember, and you start to reach people, because one of the big problems we're all addressing, the elephant in the room, is you're not reaching net new people anymore. So by starting to do things where you're reaching net new people, you solve so many of the problems you're dealing with as a e-commerce company, modern or legacy or somewhere in the middle. You don't have to see that drop in short-term revenue, because the things that we're all doing right now, generally the status quo has gotten so much more expensive and not incremental, that just by stepping out of that ever so slightly, there's a lot of just short-term gain to find as well. So it's a great time. I guess the point is, it's a great time to start changing your tactics and strategies here.
So one of the things we talk about in our report, The Multiplier Effect, is that these have to be, brand and performance should be an integrated effort. It sounds like
Right.
that's very much how you arrived at. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't necessarily bucket. I mean, bucket is operationally sometimes a requirement, but always on, toggle, because maybe we have 3 or 4, let's call them funnel clearing events every year, right? So we toggle, we want to fill that funnel and then we want to empty it. So those are the toggles, but I wouldn't say it's binary. Like, we're always learning, right? Because when it's binary, we learn less. And this is all about learning and iteration and tight feedback loop, so that we know what works and what doesn't work. But we need to define better what works. And hopefully I talked a bit about that earlier.
so tell me about Marathon. How did you get started with Marathon, and how's it going?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Marathon is amazing. It is a tool, a software tool brands can use to measure brand and connect their brand building to their actual revenue, which has been the problem with brand, right? Because it's hard to measure long-term impacts of things that we do. And so that's what it intends to do. It helps to aim to apply rigorous measurement that kind of feels like performance marketing metrics, but is all about building your long-term growth in your resilient baseline or base sales, mostly for performance marketing led organizations. But it's going very well. Lots of customers are starting to see some of those increases in the short term that they didn't think they would see. And we've been extremely surprised by that. And they're seeing that growth in that resilient base sales as well, by doing some of these very simple tactics, and some tactics that people would scoff at, which I love. But that's effectively what Chubbies started doing when we started to transition. We started doing the opposite of what you would see on DTC Twitter or whatever. There's a lot of arbitrage out there if you just think from first principles and go your own direction.
So we are also at WARC. But one of our goals this year is to try and make the 21st century case for brand building. And with so many companies that have started as digital e-commerce companies, when you talk about brand, people just think big, expensive TV ads, right? So what are some of your favorite places to run brand advertising, and how does it differ from performance? And what digital channels are you using? And just any advice you have for how to really effectively build brands online.
I think the easiest is to start on the platforms you're already using, but just use your best organic pieces of content that got the most shares and follows. So it earned engagement, it changed behavior, it prompted action, but make sure the creative is such to where when someone sees it, they know who you are, what you do. And ideally, it increases the probability that when they come in market, they seek you out and buy. That's the subjective piece, but you know something's a meme that just hacks for engagements, and then you know when something is. And you ideally want to find that hybrid, that unicorn. And every brand has at least one of those things. Start running that. You probably never would have run it, or you did and you cut it off because it wasn't driving click-based attribution. But run that, purchase campaign. You'll immediately start reaching net new people. CPMs will probably come down, right? That's probably the crawl or the gateway drug to doing this. Yeah. So stay on your platforms. Most of us are heavily Meta. Stay on Meta. Of course, do YouTube, do TikTok, do TV, but that's probably a bigger leap. So let's start with the first step is just different creative. Second step, do follower growth campaigns generally. And that freaks people out, and I get it. But that subscriber, that follower is definitely worth something. The third is more niche, but use a custom event to optimize for sessions from organic search. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to spend our money to build, is people searching for our brand. It's totally doable. Happy to help. Marathon has that, but you can do it in a variety of other ways. Those will be the three things. I mean, don't change, because that's when you start to lose money, is when you're like, okay, I need to become a TV advertiser, and you've never done TV. Not that you shouldn't do it, but let's get the core working first.
Terrific. That's great. Thank you. Well, this has been such a great conversation. And I have to say, Preston, I really enjoy your Socratic dialogues that you post on LinkedIn between CMOs and CFOs.
Oh, thank you.
I would love for our audience to go check those out, because they do make me actually laugh often, which it's not something I often associate with LinkedIn content. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, business needs a bit more fun than humor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate it. It was great having you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I'm grateful to be here.
Well, for those interested in gathering more fodder to bring to the finance team, do follow Preston on LinkedIn and check out those dialogues between the CMOs and CFOs. At WARC, we also have upcoming reports and articles further exploring this dynamic, so be sure to look out for those this month and in early May if you're a WARC subscriber. I'm Ann Marie Kerwin, America's editor for WARC. Be sure to subscribe and follow the WARC podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Thanks for listening.